Hello, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we'll discuss the situation in Ukraine as of May 13th, 2025. A tremendous number of events have occurred today, so let's get started. Let's begin by moving to the line of contact. Today we're seeing a large number of geolocations being reported. Amid ongoing negotiations, the Russian army is ramping up the pace of its offensive. According to certain pro-Russian sources, the islands south of Kamenka, Nikolaevka, and Kazatskoye have come under full control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Let me remind you that separate Ukrainian sources suggest the Russian army is concentrating its units on these islands to prepare for a potential crossing of the Dnipro River and to establish control over the Ukrainian side of the river in the Kherson region. For now, the situation involves only the islands and some areas adjacent to them. No attempts by the Russian side to force a crossing of the Dnipro have been reported yet. Now let's move on to the Zaporizhia sector of the front, from where a lot of news is coming in. Let me remind you that just yesterday, we noted that around Kamenka and Stepnohursk, about a dozen or more geolocated videos were published showing FPV drone strikes on the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. Already yesterday, we assumed that the Russian army might launch an active offensive in the near future. And today we received some map updates. A certain neutral cartographer reported that Russian units have managed to significantly expand their control zone and are now close to Kamenka and the main fortified positions of the Ukrainian armed forces in that settlement. According to neutral cartographers, Russian units have taken control of positions to the south and southeast of Kamenka. This is what the map looked like yesterday evening, May 12, 2025. And this is what the map looks like today. Next, we're moving to the southern Donetsk direction, where probably the most important and interesting news of the last 24 hours has emerged. We'll start with Zelenoy Pole. Recall that the Russian army was advancing very actively in this area before the May ceasefire began. Literally every day, there were adjustments made in favor of Russian forces. The offensive was primarily progressing along Route 05-10, both south and north of the road, toward the settlements of Zelenoy Pole and Novopol. Today, minor adjustments appeared on various pro-Russian maps, indicating that over the past day, the Russian army again managed to slightly expand its zone of control. Later, during the day on May 13th, objective control footage was published. Here is the video. In these frames, we can observe FPV drone strikes by the armed forces of Ukraine on Russian assault troops, who are gradually and steadily advancing toward the two villages, Zelenoy Pole and Novopol. Based on this footage, we made some minor map color changes. That is, we see that Russian forces have come right up to the two settlements across a wide front, and most likely will soon begin storming both villages. Now we're moving to the village of Bohoyavlenka. Today, this sector of the front has yielded the largest number of geolocations and icons. Speaking of the settlement itself, we see that footage continues to be published showing artillery and FPV drone strikes, both on Ukrainian positions and various pieces of equipment, primarily communications equipment. However, today, several pro-Russian sources have fully marked Bohoyavlenka as being under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Moreover, some highly reliable sources report that the Russian armed forces have fully established control over this village. Furthermore, there are reports that, if any fighting is still ongoing, it's only on the far northwestern and northeastern outskirts. This suggests that most likely tomorrow, the Russian Ministry of Defense will confirm that the armed forces of the Russian Federation have taken full control of this settlement. Additionally, some cartographers note a breakthrough by Russian units south of the settlement of Otradnoye. The advance in this case is coming from the direction of Dnipro Energia and also from the village of Razdolnoye. Effectively, Russian forces have come close to Otradnoye, and, according to some cartographers, they have also approached the southeastern outskirts of the settlement of Kamar. Now, speaking about Otradnoye, today we've received footage showing a Russian drone flying over the settlement and dropping leaflets urging Ukrainian soldiers stationed there to surrender. We usually see this kind of footage right before a storming operation, which primarily suggests that active combat is about to begin, meaning the Russian army has reached the immediate outskirts of Otradnoye. Secondly, this video implies that within the next 24 to 48 hours, Russian forces may attempt their first entry into the village. Next, let's move slightly northward, toward the settlements of Novoserhivka, Novolexandrivka, and Muravka. Today, some cartographers have marked an expansion of Russian-controlled areas. This is how the map looked yesterday. Today, several cartographers have made additional markings, though still without geolocations. Based on this footage and the updated maps, it appears that Russian units have come very close to the settlements of Novomykolaiivka and Muravka. Additionally, from Muravka, Ukrainian sources have published this video. It's a significant one, though it has caused some mixed reactions. In it, we can observe operations by Ukraine's 59th Assault Brigade. In this footage, Ukrainian forces are destroying farm facilities located in the northeastern part of Muravka. Pro-Russian analysts were quick to claim that Russian troops were likely already present in those farms. However, a bit later, Ukrainian sources provided clarification. According to these Ukrainian sources, the 59th Brigade has completely withdrawn from these settlements, and currently, either the same brigade or an affiliated unit is attempting to destroy as many buildings as possible in and around Novomykolaiivka and Muravka. The purpose is to prevent Russian forces from concentrating in these villages. In other words, infrastructure is being destroyed to complicate future Russian efforts to build up critical mass in this area, possibly for further offensives toward Novopavlivka or northward toward Udakne. Nevertheless, despite the fact that these areas are technically still under Ukrainian control, it's clear that Ukraine is preparing for a full retreat from this section of the front. If the Ukrainian army withdraws from these two settlements, the Russian army will have effectively entered Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Next, we move on to the Pokrovsk front section, which is currently producing a large volume of significant updates. Let's begin with the southwestern outskirts of Pokrovsk. The Russian armed forces continue their offensive near the village of Zverov, and today reports indicate that this village has almost completely come under Russian control. At least, that's according to various neutral cartographers, who are updating their maps accordingly. Yesterday, the map still looked like this, although some reliable pro-Russian sources had already reported a breakthrough in this area. Today, that information has been corroborated by more trustworthy sources. According to cartographers and experts, Russian troops have taken full control of the western and southwestern parts of Zverove and are now steadily pushing further toward the southwestern outskirts of Pokrovsk itself. Next, we head to the eastern flank, which is also yielding important developments. As a reminder, yesterday we updated the map in the area around the Muravka River and the Kherson Toretsk. There's a small reservoir here, and the rivers branch off in different directions. We saw footage of Ukrainian FPV drone operators striking Russian troops moving near the dam. Based on that footage, we concluded that the Russian army was attempting to seize control of the mines and industrial infrastructure in this area. Today, however, the Russian Ministry of Defense issued a new report stating that Russian troops from the Center Group have fully cleared the settlement of Muravka. Based on this MOD report, we've made a new update to the map. Once again, let's look at the dynamics. This is what the map looked like at the start of renewed hostilities following the end of the May ceasefire, the morning of May 11, 2025. By the evening of May 12, reports indicated that the dam was under Russian control and that the Russian presence on the Ukrainian side of the Muravka River was expanding. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense claims that Muravka has been fully cleared. That said, some pro-Russian analysts argue that Ukrainian resistance still lingers in parts of the village, particularly in the northwestern sector, which Russian assault units are currently sweeping and clearing. Regardless, it's now evident that even if there is still isolated resistance, the eastern flank of Pokrovsk has effectively collapsed. At this point, we're seeing a clear encirclement forming around Pokrovsk, Novoekonomikne, and Mirnohrad, with Russian forces closing in from both the southwest and southeast. Even more importantly, we've just received crucial footage from the settlement of Malinivka. This footage came in just seconds before I started recording this video. A full breakdown will follow tomorrow, but for now, early reports indicate that Russian troops have managed to clear up to 90% of Malinivka. Based on verified footage showing Russian troops raising their flags in the village, we can assume that by the end of May 13, 2025, The Russian armed forces had established control over this area on the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. To put it bluntly, this marks a collapse of the front line and the beginning of an operational crisis for Ukrainian forces. From these positions, Pokrovsk and the surrounding settlements are now nearly encircled. Highway H32 is under Russian control, and Russian forces have secured a strong foothold along this critical route. Next, we move on to the area around these lakes, toward Novoaleksiyevka. Fighting continues here. However, today some cartographers have already updated their maps to show Russian control along Highway H32. There's a heavily fortified strongpoint located here, and most notably, Ukrainian sources themselves have confirmed that this strongpoint has fallen under Russian control. More precisely, the Ukrainian deep state project has marked this territory as a contested zone. But as experience has shown, whenever an area is marked as contested, the Russian flag usually appears there within a day or two. At least, that's how it has worked up to this point. And most likely, this pattern will continue. As for the Kleibenbik pocket itself, combat activity here has somewhat decreased in intensity. The only noteworthy update comes again from a pro-Ukrainian mapping service, which shows changes in the southern part of the pocket. Specifically, this area along Highway H20 and south of Stara Mykolaievka has come under the control of the Russian armed forces. To be more precise, pro-Ukrainian cartographers have shaded it as a grey zone. This suggests that forward elements of the Russian army have already been spotted in this area, possibly advancing towards Stara Mykolaievka. Ukrainian sources still don't have a clear stance on whether to mark these fields as under Russian control or not. Apparently, there's still some localized resistance from Ukrainian formations in this pocket. Now we move on to the Toretsk section of the front. Fighting here continues. A reminder, on May 10th, during the so-called May ceasefire, units from Ukraine's 100th Brigade attempted to re-enter the settlement of Toretsk. Ukrainian forces did manage to push in, despite sustaining massive losses confirmed even by Ukrainian sources. Currently, the Russian army is once again clearing the northern outskirts of Toretsk, trying to expel those Ukrainian units that essentially by accident, an unfortunate one for them, made it into the town. There are also reports of a complete sweep of the Zaporizhia district and nearby areas. Just to the north, reports indicate that Russian control has expanded along the railway line. In the near future, Ukrainian forces will likely be forced to retreat from the settlement of Yuzhno-Delivka, where the Russian advance continues at full pace. Next, let's move to the Siversk front. Here, we're witnessing an enormous number of strikes, a truly intense barrage using various weapon systems, including FAB glide bombs and the Sontsepyok thermobaric flamethrower system. The volume and intensity of footage strongly suggest that the Russian army is preparing for a large-scale offensive aimed at fully clearing at least the settlement of Torske and possibly pushing toward Yampil. If successful, this could allow Russian forces to encircle, or at least semi-encircle, the Ukrainian group stationed in the town of Siversk. Fighting here is ramping up rapidly. This escalation, as usual, seems to coincide with upcoming diplomatic events. On the 15th of this month, crucial negotiations are set to take place, possibly involving top-ranking officials. And as we've seen in the past, Russia tends to intensify offensive operations right before such talks, likely in an effort to secure a stronger position at the negotiating table. On the Lyman axis, battles continue near the settlement of Rydkadub. The key update today is that Russian troops have reportedly managed to enter Rydkadub and gain a foothold. Over the past several days, Russian forces have been leveling the settlement using every available weapon and caliber, all in preparation for a ground assault. And now, today, we've seen footage from objective surveillance systems that confirm Russian units are present on the eastern outskirts. In other words, the assault on Rydkadub has officially begun. This is a critical settlement, both for the Borova direction and the Lyman front, and it seems that fighting in this sector is about to intensify significantly. Moving to the northeastern Kupiansk direction, there are no notable changes here. Likewise, in the northern regions, there are no major adjustments to report. However, there is a minor update near the settlement of Yunakivka. Today, Ukrainian sources released footage showing FPV drone strikes on Russian positions, almost in the southern part of the village of Belovody, as well as in the Vodola area. And now we've received the first confirmations indicating that Belovody is completely under Russian control. Let me remind you that the main objective for Russian forces in this sector is to reach the settlement of Unakivka, or more precisely, to reach Highway H07 between Unakivka and the city of Sumy. If they manage to do that, Unakivka will essentially be surrounded. As for the Tetkino front, there are no changes. Footage continues to be released showing Russian drone strikes on Ukrainian positions. But regarding the settlement of Tetkino itself, Ukrainian operational activity has dropped to almost zero. In fact, there are virtually no new surveillance videos or analytical updates. It appears that the Ukrainian armed forces have fully withdrawn from Tetkino, though this has yet to be officially confirmed. We're still waiting for more details. And that's it for today, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and take care.